incredibly complex agricultural adaptations, such as the super lawnmower. There were even modifications for rail travel. Sales exceeded their wildest expectations. By 1959, they were selling over 30,000 a year. Some important improvements were made. A stylist was employed for the first time to improve on the shape for the Series 2 of 1958. 2-inch wider side panels and a curved bonnet were the only improvements thought necessary on the functional shape. But were such modifications enough? In the 60s, Land Rover had to face up to Japanese competition for the first time. Toyota launched its ugly Land Cruiser in Africa, and in doing so exposed some of Land Rover's weaknesses, which were noted at the time.
Kenya is to allow the Japanese to bring in a bigger quota of cars and Land Cruisers next year. Rover are fighting back with a bigger engine and stronger gearboxes and transmissions. On price, there's nothing much in it. Most people in East Africa are loyal to the Land Rover, but they would like a softer suspension for a long day's drive, curing a local complaint called Land Rover back.
Land Rover's response in 1970 was the Range Rover, which had the softer suspension, but a much heftier price tag. It was an instant success as a cult vehicle, but only in wealthier countries, where the marketing was aimed at the successful urban executive out for some light relief in the countryside.
Now you know what people see in a Range Rover.
Both vehicles have been used as a base for some outrageous machines. This amphibious-looking creature I'm driving is the Profile. Converted by Glenprom Engineering of Bristol, it's based on the Land Rover 110 with the V8 engine. The interior, with its lashings of walnut, is much more luxurious than your average off-road vehicle. The Profile costs around £45,000, which may go some way to explain why most of them end up on the sand dunes of the Middle East.
Rollin', 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 though the streams are swollen, keep them doggies rollin' raw hard. Rain and wind and weather, hell bent for leather, wishing my gal was by my side. All the things I'm missing, good bills, love and kissing, are waiting at the end of my ride. Move 'em on, hit 'em up, hit 'em up, move 'em on, move 'em on, hit 'em up, rawhide, cut 'em out, ride 'em in, cut 'em out, cut 'em out, ride 'em in, rawhide.
The best-selling Land Rover in Britain today is the 90 Turbo Diesel. The Turbo gives quite a good performance, and the Range Rover coil spring suspension improves the off-road ride. It's permanently four-wheel drive, of course. You've got 5 forward gears. Then you've got what's called a differential lock down here. You push it harder to the left and forward. That engages the 5 low-range gears that you need for serious off-road work. You engage that differential lock, and there really is quite difficult to find anywhere where this vehicle won't go. So, for £14,000, you now get power steering, classier instruments, a clock and a radio cassette, and more luxurious trim, even carpets on the floor. It's part of a strategy to move the Land Rover and the Range Rover upmarket to appeal to more sophisticated customers. But it's a policy that seems to have benefited the Range Rover rather more than the Land Rover. With new markets, like the States now on stream, for the first time last year, more Range Rovers were sold than Land Rovers. In fact, they're making fewer Land Rovers than in the 50s. Sales in Africa and the Middle East have declined seriously. So why has this happened?
Because our traditional markets, which were the backbone of the company, have just run out of cash. Oil revenues and debt crisis, and that's the basic fault. That's the reason why we had to change, because our customers want the product in those countries, but they just haven't got the money to pay for it.
So is there a future for Land Rover 40 years on?
Of course there is. I mean, we are still doing remarkably well with the Land Rover, and there's lots of growth still to be got. Our growth in Europe in the last 5 years has been 44%, showing indicatively that that market, which is growing faster than any others, there's a lot of scope for us yet there.
And what do Land Rover customers feel about the latest improvements? We asked a man who's owned 10 since 1965.
I'm a farmer, so this Land Rover gets used for going around the stock every day. We pull farm trailers with it, we pull stock trailers, and general farm use, as well as being my own private car. I've tried all sorts of the competition, which is basically Japanese. With most of the Japanese vehicles, they're very narrow and they are very much easier to tip over on hills than the new version of the Land Rover. If they paid more attention to the actual finish of the vehicle and the standard of equipment, the heating and all the rest of it, I think they would have an unbeatable vehicle. There is still nothing, without doubt, there's nothing that will touch a Land Rover with its cross-country performance.